trespassing in this city and on this planet.
I need to concentrate here for a second. Come on, man.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the
I'm
wizards.
sorry. I...
Stand down. Keep an eye on him. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I rave and rant about board games, but usually more on the ranting part. This is another top 10, as was included on my list that I gave to my patrons to vote on, but it's a little bit further down the scale as some of the other ones, and that's mostly my fault. Because after the last one I did, which was by far the most popular, the next couple that were in the rankings were actually harder to make than I thought. One of them was my top 10 games that induce anger, and then when I tried to come up with a list, I realised that it wasn't so much anger, it was just more turn angst. That was the games I was thinking of. You know, there aren't that many games that induce actual anger that I would say I enjoy, so it didn't really feel like a list I could do. And then the other one, which I thought would be quite amusing, was my top 10 train-themed games, because I normally don't like games with trains in them. But then when I tried to write that list, I struggled to come up with anywhere near 10, so I was like, okay, and even then I'd be stretching the definition somewhat by putting stuff like On the Underground, you know, as a train game, or Next London or something. Certainly any Age of Steam fans or Agent XX fans would have been garrotting me, you know, as a result of that list. So that one didn't work either. So this is the next one down, and to be fair, this is one I've kind of wanted to do myself as well. My top 10 games that I don't want to play with noobs. And before you all get your knickers in a twist, I'm not using the word noob as a derogative.
I may be a simple country hyper chicken, but I know when we're finger-licked.
Okay, this is not like to insult people and new to games or anything like that. I love teaching games, okay? Teaching games is great. But I'd be lying if I said that these 10 games in particular, if I have a chance to play them with people who know the game already, I'm instantly in a better mood than the other. I mean, it's not that I will never teach these games. These games I will teach now and again, although I must admit, one or two on this list I'm not sure I would ever teach. I don't think I've ever taught one or two of these. But yeah, if I can, I'd rather do it. It's that situation where you go, oh, you're playing that game. Oh, I really like that one. Oh, that could be fun. Yeah. And you got a new person in. So then you sort of freeze up and you think, maybe I'll go over to that one instead. And it makes you hesitate, makes you want to maybe try something out, or just go back to playing it solo if need be. Again, this is not to say that you're, that I don't like it. If you're a noob and you want to teach this and you want to learn this game,
What do you say we plead insanity?
it's just one of those things. I mean, everybody's got them, okay? You must have some games that you like, or some games that you're a big fan of that you think, I'd rather play this with people who know the game, so if there is a new player, I'm a little bit less wanting to. I think your reasons are going to kind of overlap with mine, because typically it tends to come down to added game length, because playing with newer players typically makes the game take longer. Not being able to use certain expansion items, like you can't use complicated expansions or player powers and stuff like that too often with teaching a new player because it's too overwhelming for them. But it could also just be sometimes the balance of the game. Like the balance of the game is just a bit off kilter if not everybody is kind of on the same page. You know, and certain games, I mean, I've not put it on this list, but Root is a perfect example. I can imagine that is a game that people hate to teach, because Root, seriously, you might as well just give somebody a $5 and tell them to buy the app. It's such a good way to learn the game. But you know, if you've got an asymmetrical game like that, do you want to have 3 factions by people who know the game well and one person controlling a faction who hasn't got a clue? You know, the balance does kind of, the scales do tip a little bit on that one. So that's like a kind of an example. So without further ado,
Yes, get on with it!
my number 10 is definitely a little weaker on this list because A, I taught it like 2 weeks ago, or maybe last week even, it was quite recent, but I played a couple of games of this recently and both of them were teaching games. However, I taught one, someone else taught the other. And one thing that certainly came about with teaching these games is firstly, you don't get to use some of the expansion material pretty often, although I did in one game because I trusted the 2 people that were there. But then the other problem that comes with it is that this game does take a bit long, a little bit too long, if you've got nothing but new players, because there's a lot for them to kind of delve into. That is Lost Ruins of Arnak, the Czech Game Editions game. I do love this game, I do love playing it, and as I say, I have taught it recently. But I taught it to 2 people I know at my games club that I could trust to handle the player powers. That being said, the game did take a lot longer than it probably should have done. You know, they're not the quickest players when it comes to AP, and it just made that the game that could have easily finished in about 90 minutes, given it was only 3 of us, was taking like 2.5 hours, and I'm kind of like, okay, we kind of need to wrap this up now, guys. You know, is there any way we can rush the end, because you shouldn't be taking this long on your turns now. So there's that aspect. On top of that, I want to use those player powers, and yes, it worked with those 2. But when it was being taught the other week at an all-day event, you know, there was 3. I think 1 person had played it before, 2 new. I obviously knew how to play it, but we couldn't use the player powers with them, and you know, we couldn't use one of the new funky research boards. So we had to use. I think we did use the snake board on the original base game, but even then, that's only so-so. I want to use the monkey board and the waterfall board and all that stuff from the new expansions. I want the expansion content in my game of Arnak. And not being able to use it is a little bit annoying, especially as it's a game that doesn't hit the table that often. But yeah, it's lower down on the list because I will teach this one, because the rulebook, to give it credit, is pretty smooth. The rules are smooth and the actions aren't terribly complicated, but just something about the game length and the fact that you can't use the expansion content does make me feel like, have you played Arnak before? It would be great if you had.
You're the Diet Coke of evil. Just 1 calorie, not evil enough.
My number 9 is on here because there's just a lot of rules in the game, and this could apply to 1 or 2 other similar Rosenberg games in this instance, but the other one that I have in mind, which is Fields of Arle, I actually don't mind teaching this one. Yes, there's a lot of rules, but because everything gets you points, it's kind of one that you can sort of go, look, just do what you want to do because it's all going to be good at the end of the day. This one comes close to that, but in Fields of Arle, I've only got to teach 1 other person, maybe 2. In Caverna, you gotta teach a few more players, and if you're playing a big group and most of them are new, this Caverna game is going to take for friggin' ever to finish. But there's a lot of rules you've got to teach, because it's not just, the worker placement aspect might be simple, but then there's a lot of spaces that you've got to explain. Then you've got all those buildings that you got to look at, and then you've just got the way that the whole board works. I mean, you've got this outside bit and the inside bit. Both of them function differently. Okay, those are fields, those are caverns. You need tunnels for this, you need caverns for this. These, you need to get kids. You also need to think about what animal do you like. Well, donkeys do this in the mines, and sheep, dogs can do this outside with sheep. Here's the way that is like the 2 or 3 ways you can store sheep.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
A lot of little niche rules, which trying to teach this to new players is a bit of a nightmare. Now, you could argue Feast of Odin, which is on my shelf, although I'm not entirely sure why it is, because I am starting to get to the point where I might want to sell it, but it does have Norwegians in it, and it's alright solo. I haven't wanted to bring it out solo. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. But, Feast of Odin's got a similar problem. I don't like teaching that one because there's all those actions that you've got to teach on the massive board, and on top of all the other niche rules that you've got. And it's not an intuitive game in any way, shape, or form. And Caverna, I wouldn't say is the most intuitive game either. There's just a lot of moving parts, a lot going on. Then, going back to the whole expansion thing, Forgotten Folk. Forgotten Folk is a great way to throw in player powers, and teaching the player powers to new players is a very hit and miss affair, because you could argue that because those player powers kind of direct you into a particular strategy, it's easier to teach new players with it. But then having special player powers does restrict you in other ways, and it's obviously more stuff to teach on top, especially if you use the factions that give you things like the mushrooms and the goblins and stuff. I'm in 2 minds, but part of me thinks I don't want to teach Forgotten Folk to new players. I'm more on that side of the scale. I know some people will differ, and that's fine, because I can see the argument the other way. But yeah, it's a lot of rules, it's a lot of teach, it's a lot of moving bits.
We're just too different.
My number 8 is, I did consider putting this at 9, but on the basis that this one doesn't have anywhere near as many rules as Caverna. But the more I've been playing this lately, the more I'm in that state where this kind of is similar to the one that's actually next on this list, where it's not so much, oh, there's too many rules to teach or stuff like that. It's more that I just want the game to go at a quick pace. You know, you want it to go boom, boom, speedy, nice and speedy, straight through, get the game done in an hour and all well and good. And it is so rewarding to play this game with people who know it already so that you can go at that speed. But when you play Earth at with brand new players, particularly if most of the players are new, that 1 hour time limit is wishful thinking at the best. There's not a huge amount to teach in terms of rules, but new players, especially people who aren't used to this type of engine builder game, are going to trip up on the fact that there are just so many little things that you can trigger. You've got to think about your island and your climate board, and then you've got to think about all these things in front of you. And when you give them a hand of cards, because all the cards are unique, Earth is one of those games where you need to be mindful of what is garbage in your hand and what isn't. And I've played Earth so many times that I can do that in barely a few seconds. I can look at my hand and go, that's good, right, that's good for that objective, that works with 2 of them, probably want to do that one first, that's fine, right, those 5, build in that order, that would be pretty cool, unless anything else comes up. Garbage, 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 we're done, that's compost. And it'd take me like 10-15 seconds and I can work this stuff out.
Input.
New players can't do that. A new player gets an island that says draw 12 cards at the start of the game and only bin 5 of them in your compost. It's going to take them a long time to decide which of these 12 cards they want. I deliberately like to give new players, ones with bad starting hands, not bad starting like resources, but like not many cards to begin with, because then they don't have as much to look at. But you could argue that's maybe harder for them because you want to have lots of options. But it takes them a long time to decide on the options. And, even though the actions are simultaneous, you're only going as fast as your lowest common denominator. So with all these games that are like, oh, everybody acts at the same time, I'm trying to concentrate on my own engine while also trying to explain the rules 100 times to the people who haven't played it before. And then I'll no doubt get to the end of my multi-action red thing, cool. Right, are we done with red? And I can see that the persons that are new have barely even begun. And then you're waiting, and then you move on. And then you're waiting some more. I will teach Earth. I have taught it to many people and I do enjoy it, when I'm teaching it. But I will say that when I do get a situation like with 3 mates of mine who I meet up with every now and again, who all love Earth and we've all played it before, we all know the rules to it. Man, it's nice to be able to crank out a couple of games of that in quick succession, especially when I have to throw in that prototype, the Abundance expansion I've got in prototype form. Looking forward to getting the actual physical copy so I can replace the cards with it. But, I can teach them those rules. But when you throw in those expansion cards and you try to teach new players, that just adds to the problem again of complexity. And it's not like you can just separate out the cards, because if you want to go through the step-by-step process of mixing the cards to begin with or separating them out of the deck and then trying to put them back in later.
How about new? You crazy Dutch bastard.
Yeah, have fun with that. Have fun with that. You go right ahead, because I sure as hell ain't doing it. It's not for me. So yeah, I just want a nice speedy game, and when you have lots of new players in Earth, it ain't gonna be speedy anymore. Which kind of has a similar vibe to my number 7. In fact, my number 7 is probably arguably easier to play than Earth. A drafting game, a very popular drafting game, one of my favorite drafting games, maybe even my favorite, who knows. But it's not a gateway game, as much as some people would have you believe. There is still a reasonable amount to teach. There is a bit of depth to the game of like which card should you be looking at in favor. And you have to pay attention to what your neighbor is doing, because if you give them all the cards that they want, they're just going to steamroll with the game. These are things that new players cannot grasp when they first play 7 Wonders. And 7 Wonders, again, I have played this to death. Not to death because I still love it, but, there's a couple of things with this. Firstly, the game will drag with new players. I mean, I've seen on our Southampton group where, this game has been taught by a friend of mine to 6 new players. So they've played a 7-player game of this where only 1, maybe 2 players know what the game is. I cannot run away from those games fast enough. I mean, they drag on for ages, especially if there's 1 or 2 people in there that AP like mad. And for a game that should take you 30 minutes, it takes forever, and I would not want to be in those because I'm pretty sure I would just be sort of boof, ending it right now. But it's just not one that they grasp quick enough. And so I don't really want to have to teach it. I want, again, like Earth, a setup where we can go, right, 5 or 6 of us know how to play Seven Wonders. Yeah, it's spelled out nice and quick. All right, choose this card. Right, everybody good? Right, flip. All right, next cards. Oh, that's going to be good. Oh, that's good. But I'll choose that one. Cool. Right, flip, go. Right, and just nice and speedy and quick. And on top of that, all the expansions. Do you want to throw in leaders, cities, God forbid, Armada with new players? Yeah, have fun with that. It's not going to go down well, especially with leaders and cities. And leaders and cities are my 2 favorite expansions that I want to throw in. So all that extra iconography. I mean, there are people I know who have played Seven Wonders quite a few times in their life, and they still trip up with the iconography and leaders and cities. What do you think a new player is going to do? You cannot throw it in. Ironically, I must admit, I have not lost the irony that my first game I ever played at a board game club that got me into the hobby was Seven Wonders with leaders included, where I actually won the game. But then I like to think of myself as a fast learner. If I'm motivated to learn something, I will learn it pretty damn quick. And I just seem to have an ability to learn games fairly quick. Not necessarily their in-depth strategies to death, but I will be able to pick up the basics of a game pretty well and, hold my own. Rarely do I play a game and then find, oh God, I did absolutely rubbish. I had no idea what I was doing. Granted, some train games might have that problem, but I digress. So yeah, I just want nice, speedy, smooth game, and you're not going to get that with new players in Seven Wonders.
Me, nah. You guys, yeah. Maybe a little more down in here.
My number 6 is going to shock a few people. The fact that I even like this game already confuses me. I mean, it took a base game, an expansion, and then a second edition, and then another base game which I haven't played yet, and then another base game before I got to an element of this franchise that I actually really, really like. I'm still confused to this day. Now, I would argue that the rest of the Great Western Trail series is probably not the best game to teach new players anyway because of the kind of intricacies of the deck building and all the other stuff. But particularly the one that I like, the one that's on my shelf and that I'm willing to play, New Zealand, is a little bit of a chore when you are teaching that game, especially if someone has never played, if they've not played a deck builder before, you're really screwed. But if they've not played a Great Western Trail game before, it's going to be a slow slog because, not only do you have those elements of Great Western Trail that you have with all the other games, but then you've got all those different bonus cards to use. You've got 4 characters, not 3. You've got all the different buildings that they have to be taught. And at that point, God knows what they'll do in terms of tactics and strategy because they won't have a slightest clue what it is they're trying to do. And it just makes the game a bit more of a slog, a bit more of a chore to get through. It's already a long game, it's going to take a while, and the rules teach is not short. There's quite a lot to get through in the teaching of Great Western Trail New Zealand. It's definitely more of an investment that is required, but I'm willing to put up with that investment, now and again. But when I get mates of mine that all have played New Zealand and we know what we're doing, it's a great bit of fun to belt this one out. Now, I'll caveat that if somebody has played Great Western Trail and just hasn't played New Zealand, I'm more than willing to teach it because they've already got the fundamental basics down. And I've just got to teach in the new bits. But teaching a complete noob, Great Western Trail New Zealand, I admit, not the most recommended action in the world. But New Zealand's the one I like, I'll play the original Great Western Trail 2nd edition, but mainly only with the expansion, and even then the expansion kind of pigeonholes you into doing what the expansion opens because that's the best way to win the game at that point. I've not played Argentina, but all I keep hearing is that it's not as good as the rest, and I want to try it out of curiosity, but I'm not exactly desperate to. I just don't think any Great Western Trail is going to surpass New Zealand for me, and it's got the most stuff in it, which also makes it the harder one to play with noobs.
Your mother.
My number 5, you might argue, should really be higher up on this list because, whoa, does this have quite a few rules to go through. And asymmetrical factions, not just player powers. No, we're talking 4 asymmetrical sides. But there is a couple of advantages that this one has over some of those other ones that I mentioned, like Root. I have taught this game many a time because when it first came out, I had to teach it a bucket load of times because I had to review it. But it's one of my favorite games of all time. It is fantastic to play this, you know, regardless of whether I've got to teach it or not. But man, it's so refreshing to go to a convention and not have to teach Hegemony. Hegemony is a brilliant game. I love it. If you've got 4 people who know what they're doing, it's even better. Because teaching this game already has a lot of rules involved. It's already a bit of a slog. But this now brings up that bit I mentioned at the start about balance. Because Hegemony is designed very well, where the game I think is very well balanced. You know, there's probably some skews in 1 or 2 areas, but for what it could have been, like an unbalanced mess. Look at most things that Stonemaier make. Oh, come on! You know, this easily could have been like a massive flop. But the fact that there is a thread on BGG for every single one of the 4 factions saying it's overpowered kind of speaks volumes, really. And I do find it kind of amusing that there is. But the thing with this game is that, you know, teaching it will take a while. The game's going to be a 4-hour plus affair regardless. You know, I mean, the game's normally a 4-hour affair anyway, even with players who know what they're doing. But, you know, you're going to be there for 4 or 5 hours plus to play this game with people who don't know what they're doing. And it's, you know, I've had to teach this game from scratch once or twice because I've asked everybody who's going to play it, you need to watch a video. Watch the playthrough that Paul Grogan's done. Watch any type of rules video or read the rulebook, something. Just get the fundamentals down and then I can explain your faction if need be. And then I had 1 or 2 times where the person was too lazy to do it or made up an excuse and it's like, well, I've got to teach it now. Great. And yeah, that gets annoying, but, you know, even when I am teaching this game, I'm telling people watch the video. You kind of need to. You need to have some background knowledge to make it easier on me. But when you go to a convention, which, especially these days, I don't think I've gone to a single convention where I have not played a game of Hegemony since it came out. You know, at HandyCon, it's Shake, Battle and Roll. I suppose Essen is probably the only one where that's going to be the case, but yeah, certainly, even Games Expo, I think I played it this year at Games Expo. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah, I taught Mark Monk, Ninja Geek Games, I taught him and his mates it. So, but even then, they had at least watched the video beforehand. But yeah, it's just so easy to get it to the game table at a convention. And at most conventions, when you put it on the booking sheet to say, right, I'm bringing Hegemony, who wants to fill the slots? Fum, fum, fum. Does not take long to find 3 players that are willing to play it, and that's a good thing. You know, it's definitely so much better when you've got it. It's more balanced. There's not one faction who's kind of screwing it up for other players. It's just a well-oiled machine. But you gotta get people who know what they're doing, and it's a tall order for a game that is this big and this sort of heavy and this invested, but the fans are out there. I know a fair few of them, and at a convention, it's not difficult to find them. And when I do, oh boy, am I in for a treat.
I never get involved in politics.
My number 4, speaking of Stonemaier, where I sort of digged in earlier, this one, oh god, man, I really actually do quite hate playing this with new players. Now, this one would be higher if I enjoyed it more. It's definitely come down a little bit, you know, so I don't play this one as often. But out of all the Stonemaier games, most of them I would happily teach. I'd happily teach Viticulture. I'm more than happy to teach Wingspan. You know, Wingspan's a great game to teach. But this one game, up to 7 players, expansion factions as well. It's, for some reason, Scythe is not a fun one to teach. I love playing it with people who know what they're doing because you can go nice and quick. You've only got to do one action on your turn, top and bottom basically, and then move on to the next player. And I remember a time when a bunch of us mates played a game of Scythe, 7 player with expansion, in 90 minutes. We were super lightning fast, although that was partially helped by a mate of mine who is probably the best moderator you will get for any game ever. You will not be able to dilly-dally with him in there. He will get you moving in a good way. But Scythe, cool blimey. Yeah, the amount of times I've been turned off this game when I've seen it, when I used to see it in my Portsmouth club, because Portsmouth club played it quite a lot, and I would see it and I'd go, ooh, I'm intrigued to play Scythe again. It's been a while, and oh, for God's sake. And you realise that there's, you know, 3 people who have not played the game, and it's like, And every time I've played this game with people who don't know it, I mean, there's already a lot of rules to teach, because you got to teach a lot of the intricacy rules. It's not just simply what your board does, there's all other bits as well. They throw the balance off kilter because they're not really making the right moves to scupper other players and stuff. But the game then just drags on because they just cannot do their turns quick enough for somebody being new to the game. And so I really do regularly skip this game if I see that there's a teaching session going on. You know, if 4 or 5 of us have played the game before and understand it, but maybe they just need a rules refresher, fine. I don't mind rules refreshing, but teaching it brand new? I'd rather not. And if I must be in one of those games, I'm going to do something else while you're teaching the game. Get a drink, coffee, go out for a walk or something. I don't know. Because I don't want to be around for that bit. I much prefer to get Scythe to the table with people who can just get going, do their actions reasonably quick, and we get it done, because the game does not warrant like a 2-hour plus time limit on it. It really does need to be kept to a kind of 90-minute length. And this is one of the things that's kind of made me not play it in a while. You know, it's difficult to get this one to the table, because with so many players that can play it, you're more than likely to have a new player in there, and then what are you going to do? So, Scythe it's dropping for me. It is dropping since the days when I used to give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's closer to an 8 out of 10 now. I think it's actually fallen out of seal of distinction range. You know, is it seal? I forget which seal I have now, but yeah, it's dropping. It's dropping, and a lot of that reason is because I just don't want to play it with noobs.
Well, that's a lot less hot.
My number 3, probably the lightest game on this entire list, actually. Yeah, I mean, this is literally just a small box filler. You can play each subsequent game of this in like 5 minutes. I mean, that's all it takes. And even then, I still don't want to play this with noobs. So what filler game can possibly be so much of a chore to not play with new players? It's not that it's so much of a chore, but if you play this game with people who have never seen a trick-taking game before in their lives, yeah, The Crew. The Crew is a great trick-taking game. One of my favorite trick-takers. I played it the other day, actually. I think earlier this week. We played 3 games of it, group of 5 of us. The problem is that the group included people, not only people who had not played The Crew before, but that's fine. If you've not played The Crew before, as long as you know what a trick-taker is, that's fine. But then you have a person who doesn't know what trick-taking is. This hurts The Crew badly. I mean, you are trying to do these missions where you want to do more than just the basic mission of 2 objectives, which isn't that fun. I want to do some of the really funky missions that require you to really be, you know, smart and think and, you know, really get into the heads of the other players. You can't do that with somebody who doesn't know what a trick-taking is, because the mind of that, you know, if my mind is trying to make calculations, go, you know, like, you know, processing information like a supercomputer, trying to figure out, right, they played that card, probably should play this, but we need to get that person a free yellow, what can they do? You know, and then you go to this other person's mind or something who's never played a trick-taking game, and it's just basically a monkey. You're just going, la, da, 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 da. It might as well be that crazy, because I can't figure out what they're going to do, and they have no idea what they're doing. So the whole game just falls off balance, and you'll be like, right, played that card. You haven't, play that's free, play the free pink, yes, you've played the free pink, right, why are you trying to win the trick, you moron? And I've not called them a moron, but it induces anger in that respect, because you're thinking, for crying out loud, this isn't rocket science.
Yes, the number I was thinking of was the letter M.
Now, I realise that some of that is on me, because I've got it into my head that everybody should know what a trick-taking game is. And a lot of people don't, which surprises me, but then I grew up in a family where with relatives and various other people, we have played regularly with a deck of cards. Hearts and trumps and rummy and, you know, happy families and whatever, you know. In fact, I haven't played bridge. I would like to try bridge, but I've played a lot of other card games. So I already knew before I got into board gaming what a trick-taking game was, and when somebody showed me a trick-taking game, and I don't know what my first one was, but once I tried one, it's like, oh yeah, I know how this works. Yeah, I've done it before. Who doesn't? And I can't get this out of my mind that this is a concept that's alien to a lot of people, especially as I'm obviously getting older now and playing with some younger folk who probably never played with a deck of cards in their life because their generation never really bothered with those sort of things. So it's hard to get my brain out of this sort of way of thinking. But what it does mean is that trick-taking games in general can be a bit of a chore to teach, but most of them are simple enough that they'll get it. But the crew requires the group to be on point. It requires it to be, as perfect as it can get. And as soon as you throw that balance off, it starts to fall apart. I almost wanted this to be my number one. But I had to think, investment is not that much time. Trick-taking is not the hardest thing to grasp. And if we must play the easier missions, usually most people get it after a game or two, and it's only 5 minutes a game, so it's not too bad. But yeah, I did contemplate this one being number one because I really just want, you don't have to have played the crew, but at least know what a smeging trick taker is.
17? No, 17. 18? No, you got a 14 now.
My number two, my favourite game of all time, at least as of the last top 100, who knows if it will remain there. But yes, I have played this game a lot, and it's still a fantastic fun game. But I play it on Board Game Arena now and again, although I must admit playing it on Board Game Arena with randoms is not as fun as it could be. But yeah, teaching Ark Nova is not easy. It's quite a fair amount of rules. It's a mechanic that's only really been seen in, I think, 1 or 2 other games before, the whole typewriter mechanic. There's a lot of iconography on cards. There's a lot of interactions with cards and various other aspects of the game. You've then got the 2-point tracks you've got to concentrate on. You've got the 5 actions in general. And then because I can't separate out the expansion, I have to play, Marine Worlds with this, which means they've got to learn the sea creatures as well. Granted, I cannot use the special upgrade cards, but I want to use the upgrade cards. They're really, really cool, but it's the only real thing out of the Marine Worlds expansion that you can easily separate out. I'm not going through that massive deck of cards and separating out all the sea creatures and the expansion cards. Screw that. I'm not buying that for $1. This one though, but the upgrade cards you can. But yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot of rules to get through, and their turns are going to take forever, and you're constantly going to have to remind them of rules during the game, and it's just going to make this game that's already, admittedly, probably too long. It is too long. When you play this with 3 or 4 players, I do wish the game was shorter. Now, that being said, when I play this with people who know what they're doing, the game does finish in a reasonable time, like 90 minutes for 3 players sometimes, or 2 hours max, and maybe 2.5 hours max for a 4-player game. It does finish in a reasonable time frame with people who know what they're doing. But when you throw the new people in, 3 hours, 3.5, oh boy, it can take a while, and that's not even including the teach. Yeah, I mean, this game really does want people who have played the game before at least once or twice and have an idea of what's going on, but brand new. I have taught these games before, but part of me is almost twitching as I explain some of the rules and realizing they're not grasping it, and it's just like, this is going to be one of those games, isn't it? Oh, why didn't I opt to play that instead? And it's just, yeah. I like playing Ark Nova solo, although, the problem with the solo mode, the solo mode in the game is not bad, but it's somewhat limiting. The solo mode that was done on BGG is very swingy, but it is a way to play it solo. So Board Game Arena helps me to play this game with people who know what they're doing, and blimey, there's some strong players out there that give me for a run for my money. But playing with randoms on the internet, I want to have some of that interaction with other people at the table. And it's just not easy to get those sort of people in real life. Although, that being said, this is improved with my Southampton group because a few of us do own Ark Nova there and a few of us have played it. So it does occasionally hit the table nicely there. And I can certainly play it with people who know what they're doing at a convention. But, yeah, I love the game. But blimey, yeah, a new player? And my number one. And yeah, I've noticed that a lot of these games I've mentioned are in my top 10 of all time. Or at least they were in my recent list. So maybe that kind of speaks volumes, because some of these games have had expansions, which means I love introducing that content. Some of these games are definitely more fun when people are on the same wavelength, which is going to impact the ability to play this with noobs. But this one, I tend to more be the noob in this one. I mean, I know what I'm doing in this game, but I am by no means an expert. I mean, I can barely beat difficulty 3 and 4 on this game, and there are people out there who can beat difficulty 5 and 6 in their sleep. Still don't know how they do it, but I'm the one that wants to be the noob in this game. I don't want other people to be the noob in Spirit Island. Spirit Island's fantastic. It is one of my favorite co-ops of all time. It is a brilliant game. Not for everybody, which is fair play to say. You know, there are people that are going to bounce off this quite hard. But I had a chance to play this, and they were saying, oh, there's going to be 4 of us if we play this. And it's like, oh, I'm already a bit hesitant wanting to play this with 3 or 4. But, well, 3 is not bad, but 4 is quite a slog. And I was about to sort of jump into it, thinking, you know what, this would be quite cool. And then they said, oh, yeah, and I'm teaching 2 new people. Oh, yeah, and I moved over to the Arnak game. Spirit Island, this game is a long game as it is. It's complex. There's a lot of interactions. You've got a ton of discussion to deal with for how you're going to deal with the invaders from turn to turn. I don't have the strategic expertise of this game to be able to make the best decisions in the world, but trying to teach the rules of this game, of which there are a fair few, trying to make people understand their character spirit panels, which even with the low complexity ones are still going to have a fair amount to deal with, you know, unique cards and strategies and that, and get through the game in a reasonable time frame when it's already going to burn your brain because you've got to keep track of all this stuff that's going on. Oh my god. Oh, this is a slog.
Let me go back in there and face the peril.
No, it's too perilous.
And it's alright if I'm the noob here, because then at least I already know the rules, I understand the interactions, but then somebody else who knows the game better can at least guide me a little bit through like the tracking of what's going on with a lot of these creatures, or like, here's how we deal with this difficulty 6 monstrosity, you know, we just got to do this and this, and it's like, you know, thanks, I'm learning something here. But I'm at the lowest playing level here in terms of the noob factor. And I know the game fairly well, you know, I know the game very well, but in terms of strategic nature, I'm probably only intermediate at the game. But to do brand new, no. It just takes way too long. People have asked me if I'm willing to teach Spirit Island, the 3 of them, and I'm just like, no, not happening. I don't want to teach this game. I just want to play it with people who know what they're doing. And, you know, I'll have a lot of fun. I mean, Spirit Island, honestly, is a game I play solo more often than multiplayer anyway because of how long it takes and the fact that I don't want to teach it. But I can play it true solo. If I'm mad, I could even play it two-handed, although I just find that a bit too much to track. I'd much prefer to just play it true solo. That does limit me on certain spirits, but what are you going to do? But I just save those spirits that don't work solo for multiplayer games. But yeah, there's a reason I do play this one solo, because noobs for this one kind of scare me. They scare me. I don't want to be teaching this one. There's too much going on. Too much to track, too much complexity, too much interaction. Even though it's a co-op, which normally should be a better one to teach, because you can teach co-ops in a specific way and make it easier for new players. But for example, I mean, you know, I've just got all the Deep Rock Galactic expansions through. Cannot wait to play through these. But this game, co-op, I don't have to teach probably more than a third of the rules in this game, maybe half tops, before we can get stuck into a game, and then I can just teach you the stuff as we go through. This one, in contrast to something like Spirit Island, is an absolute pleasure to like teach with new players. I will gladly play Deep Rock Galactic with new players any day of the week. But you can't do that with Spirit Island. It's just way too much. And for me, it's why it boosted up to #1, even above Ark Nova. 2 of my favourite games of all, well, 3 of my favourite games of all time. In fact, actually, how many of these were on my top 10? Ark Nova, Hegemony, Spirit Island, and Earth. I'm not sure about Arnak. Did Arnak get the top 10? I'm not sure, but maybe 7 Wonders. But yeah, we're talking not nearly half of this list are my favourite games of all time. I guess that speaks some volumes. You know, I like to play some of my favourite games with people who also find them to be their favourite games and therefore are on a similar playing field. It's just the way it is.
This is the way.
So there you have it, my top 10 games, and I don't like to play with noobs. But again, I'm not meaning it as a derogative. It's just, you know, newer players. You know, some of these games I think function better for me personally when I play it with people who know what they're doing. It's not to say I will never teach any of these games, although like I said, Spirit Island is probably one I will never teach. You know, there are things like that, but I mean, I've taught Caverna, I've taught Scythe, I've taught Great Western Trail New Zealand, I've taught Arnak, I've taught Hegemony. You know, those games I have taught. But if you give me the option, I'm naturally going to take the other one. And a lot of these other games I'd probably rather play with people who know what they're doing. I mean, you know, DEROGATORY, I love teaching that to new players. But if people know what they're doing, it's probably going to be a better experience overall. But not enough to make me not want to teach it. You know, Star Wars Outer Rim. Love to play that game with people who know what they're doing, but teaching it's not that bad. It's thematic, it's story-driven, and people usually get it after a short while. And I think a lot of it does come down to like the immersion and the length and complexity, because there's a fair amount of rules in Star Wars Outer Rim, but the immersion factor is so high that you're playing this with the right people. You don't mind teaching it and having it take a bit longer because you're engaged in what's going on. Deep Rock Galactic, again, immersive, but also smooth to teach. It's a very easy one to teach, Deep Rock Galactic, and the smoother a game is to teach, the more likely I'm willing to play this with new players because it doesn't feel like a slog anymore. And certainly if the game has not been expanded up the wazoo with all these extra bits that I want to throw in, then that's an advantage in itself. Although some of these games are actually just as good with expansions and without. I mean, Pursuit of Happiness, I can teach that with expansions, although the game will take a bit longer, so I'm sometimes a bit hesitant on that. But, you know, as I look around, yeah, let's see, what games with expansions do I know? Well, Seven Wonders Architects, one of the easiest games to teach in the world. That's not an expansion. Wingspan. I'll happily teach Wingspan with every single expansion included. All the European birds, the Asia birds, and the Oceania birds. Barely changes the complexity. All you got to do is teach one or two little extra things that the Oceania board throws in, and the Oceania board balances a few other aspects. So, you know, why would you not? You know, a lot of these games do work even while teaching them. And some of these games are still good fun to teach to other players. And, I mean, all games are fun to teach in some respect, but yeah, when you start getting to these top 10 and maybe a few others on top, I mean, I did consider XCOM. XCOM was hard to say. I've played it with new players before and it's been good fun, but because it's a speed game in some respects, a new player dealing with the whole speed aspect can be a little bit problematic, but there wasn't really much I could think of with honourable mentions on this one. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts on the subject. What games do you not want to play with noobs, or are you less wanting to teach? What are your reasons? Do they overlap with mine? Or particularly, do you have a reason that you don't want to teach these games that I haven't thought of? I'd definitely be interested to know that. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up and leave a comment as requested. Check out all the other content I've been doing, from best and worst series to normal reviews to speed reviews, and as we get up to Essen, it's going to be a lot more content besides. I mean, that Deep Rock Galactic expansion I was showing there, oh yeah, I'm going to do a Beyond the Base Game video for that, so there's a lot of stuff to come in the next few weeks. But until next time, remember, regardless of whether you consider yourself a noob or not, we still enjoy teaching games to you. It's all good, and it's only a game. Bye for now.